Hello my fellow Archons, and welcome to the 12 days of KeyForge Christmas. We are here, day 1 of 12 consecutive days of KeyForge content, so you will not want to miss out on that. Be sure to tune into all those videos. At the end of the 12 days, on day 13, I will actually be doing a KeyForge giveaway. I'll be making a post in the community tab of my YouTube channel, probably on that day, with more details regarding the giveaway. But be sure to tune into all 12 of these videos, and especially day 13 for the giveaway so you don't miss out on that. But for day one of KeyForge Christmas, I thought it could be fun to take a look at a few of my favorite KeyForge decks for my collection. So I have here my top 3 favorite KeyForge decks. It was so hard to choose because I have so many fun decks that I really enjoy playing. But when it came down to it, I think these 3 are the ones that I tend to have the most fun with. So without further ado, let's hop into these decks, take a look at what we've got here. So obviously we've got to start out with the newest addition to the collection, far and away one of my favorite decks. I just got it, I just got a hold of it, and it has very quickly become one of my favorites. I opened this deck in one of my recent videos where I opened a few decks, and this would have to be Chopibro, the Combatant of Gold. Sanctum Shadows logo, so let's get this opened up here. So this is a 98 SAS Age of Ascension deck. I unfortunately did not capture my reaction to seeing that it was 98 SAS on camera, but I did catch the opening of the deck itself on camera. And obviously I had to hook it up with these nice sort of like purplish card sleeves here, put on those royal colors because it is truly a royal deck. But this deck is a lot of fun. I've played about 19 games with it on TCO, Crucible Online, in the competitive queue, and so far it's gone like, I don't know, like 15-4, I think. So it's putting in a lot of work. So one of the first things that's really fun about this deck is that it moves pretty darn quick. It generates Ember somewhat quickly. I mean, even right here in the Logos house, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Ember pips. And that's not counting all the extra Ember that you get from the Double Eureka. Double Eureka, that's very bursty. And it also archives cards, 2 random cards out of your hand just for later, which is really nice. The Bayonet Rupture, this deck does have Brig in it. The Bayonet Rupture and Interdimensional Graft, classic AoE combo right here. And it can archive these pieces away pretty consistently. I mean, Double Eureka helps with that. The Labyrinth gets it into archives. And then the Shadows has a hidden stash as well, so that can help archive things away also. But the Brig is such a cool piece of the deck, along with the fact that it has a Titan mechanic. This is actually a deck that has taught me not to be so afraid of Titan mechanic. I never really liked Titan mechanic very much in the past, just because like it's so risky to make both players' keys cost -1. But with something like Brig, and also the Proclamation 3/4/6E, while your opponent does not control creatures from 3 different houses, their keys cost +2. So this would make their keys cost 8 most of the time. And then Titan Mechanic will just bring their keys down to 7. So I mean, it makes my keys 5, their keys 7 with both of these on the board and this guy on a flank. But with Bayonet Rupture, doubling their Ember and then having them forge for cheaper with a Titan Mechanic so that I get more Ember when they have to transfer it over to me after their Forge a Key step. So Titan Mechanic is actually a really fun part of this deck. And it also plays well with the Sanctum, because the Sanctum house does a lot of very clutch fighting. It has the One Stood Against Many, it has the Grey Rider, Take Hostages, Smite, and Double Golden Aura. So it always feels real good to be able to Golden Aura my Titan Mechanic to put it into Sanctum and make it so it can't be dealt damage, and then just start fighting like crazy with the One Stood Against Many. Especially if the Titan Mechanic is next to something like a little Nif. So I'm stealing every time I fight with it, controlling the board, stealing some Ember, and it's just a good time. So the Titan Mechanic is awesome. The Sanctum house is actually a lot of fun. Sanctum is actually my favorite house in the game. So the fact that I now technically have the highest rated Sanctum deck registered to decks of KeyForge is very exciting. Of all the decks out there with House Sanctum, mine happens to be the highest for now, at least since the last I looked. Barrister Joya obviously is such a threat to the opponent. It's just one of those must-kill creatures, otherwise they just cannot reap and generate Ember that way. Take Hostages is awesome, just to be capturing whenever I fight with stuff like the Smite or the Golden Auras, stuff like that. What else do we got in here? Prince Derek Unifier is Really cool. I love his play effect of gain 3 Ember if you control creatures from 3 different houses. I remember, I think it was Dinobot was telling me, it's just some of that burst that cannot be touched by Infernus, because Infernus is just such a pain for bursty decks, especially that decks that rely on Ember Burst due to bonus pips. But this is burst that does not rely on bonus pips. Same with Eureka. Eureka does have a bonus pip, so it can be affected by Infernus in that way, but that extra 2 that you get for playing it as an alpha cannot be touched by the Infernus, just like the Prince Derek, which is so cool. So just gaining that half a key if I control creatures from 3 different houses is super nifty. So then, obviously, there is a little bit of capture with Abad the Grim, the Board and the Redeemed, doing some Ember control that way. Unfortunately, the heater just came on down here, so if you hear some background noise, that's what that is the heater. But now moving on to the Shadows. This Shadows is so good. Snecklifter, such an amazing card. Take control of an enemy artifact while under your control if it does not belong to one of your 3 houses. It is considered to be of House Shadows. Just the fact that this deck has a little bit of artifact control in the form of Snecklifter, just as that threat, so if they play down like a strong artifact, then I can steal it from them. And that is never something that they want to see. So Snecklifter is so clutch. TMTP is obviously a classic card that you love to see, especially when you have things like, I got the 2 Ronnies in here to combo off of that TMTP to take them below 6. But sometimes it doesn't even matter, because with Proclamation, their keys are most likely going to be costing 8 for most of the time. So you don't even necessarily need anything to combo with that TMTP, because you'll bring them down to 6, but their keys cost 8. So it just puts them in a very tricky scenario, because it's like, I need to get above 6, because if I don't, then I have things like the Ronnies or the Umbra, or even like Abad or whatever. So it's like my opponent has to get above 6, but if they go, actually they have to get most of the time above 8. But if they do that, then I have TMTP, or I have something like Brig, making bursting even more dangerous for them, because then I get even more Ember off of that interdimensional graft. So Too Much to Protect is awesome. The double little nifs are really cool, especially when they combo with things like the stuff in Sanctum that I've mentioned already, or the Umbra, stealing 2 every time I fight with the Umbra, is really cool. Dust Chronicles as an extra Ember pip also helps me archive away some of those key combo pieces that I want from later. This deck does suffer against really massive boards, just because there's not a whole lot of board control. There's the fighting that I mentioned before, there's the Lights Out, Whistling Darts can do maybe a little bit of damage, but obviously not a whole lot. The fighting in Sanctum, but I mean that's about it in terms of board control. So if I'm up against this really huge like mass mutation board of just these really cancerous creatures that I have to deal with, then that's when the deck starts suffering quite a bit. So it suffers against decks with big boards, and then also against decks with lots of things like Stealth Mode. Keeping me from playing those key action cards really, really hurts. So Stealth Modes hurt this deck a lot. Things like Control the Weak, I mean, stuff like Control the Weak hurts just about any deck. But decks like this as well really suffer from not being able to choose which house it wants when it wants it. What else was there that really hurts this deck? Oh yeah, key cheats. Key cheats are very effective against this deck as well. If you have a number of key cheats that can go off pretty consistently, this deck does not have a whole lot of ways to counter that. Because then that sort of nullifies things like my Brig and my TMTP with proc and everything, because I don't have that access to that Ember. You're using it in the middle of your turn to forge a key, which is very sad. Very, very sad indeed. Time Traveler and Help from Future Self, just such a fun pair of cards. Helps me cycle into those key combo pieces even faster. Professor Sutterkin is one of those threats. Igor, Archimedes to archive stuff like the Igor or the Ronnie, or even the Abad, maybe the Barrister Joya, if they get destroyed while next to Archimedes, is very cool. And this is also the card that my channel name is kind of based on, Aembermedes, Archimedes. Gotta love this card right here. And then one last thing that this deck can suffer against sometimes is decks with lots of Too Much to Protect. If I'm up against a deck with like 2 TMTPs or 3 TMTPs, I'm still trying to figure out how to counter that with this deck. Because I could brig them, but then they're going to TMTP me, and then I could TMTP them, but then they're just going to do it back to me again, and then this deck isn't capable of really taking them off a second time like that. At least not that I've learned. So I really want to continue practicing with this deck and figure out how to optimize the gameplay in those scenarios where I'm sort of falling behind, or against a bad matchup, how can I play to the best of my ability to give this deck the dub. But yeah, this deck is so much fun. Far and away one of my best pulls. Or, not one of my best pulls, my best pull. It is such a powerful and fun deck. And yeah, I'm super excited to have pulled it. Definitely one of my favorites. All right, let's move on to my second favorite. Alrighty, so next up here, I've got Holihammer, the Meaningless Flat Footman with Saurian Starlight Sanctum. This is a mass mutation deck, and this deck actually has a kind of a cool story behind it. But before we get into that story, let me show you what makes this deck so cool. It shows up in the Starlion's house. We have Dino Alien. It is a Z-Force agent deck. However, you'll notice it's actually a double Z-Force agent deck. So it has 2 copies of each of the upgrades, and then obviously the 2 Z-Force Agent 14s. So when I opened this, I was absolutely thrilled, but it actually happened in kind of a funny way. I was actually playing a completely blind sealed match with my brother. So we just opened up these decks. We didn't look at what was in it. We just started playing with the cards. And as I was drawing, I think it was pretty early into the game, I had my hand, and I drew like the Z-Force Agent and then like a few Z-Force upgrades. And I was like, wow, cool. I got like all the Z-Force Agent stuff like pretty quick. And then I looked closer at what one of the upgrades was, at 2 of them, and they had the same name. And I was like, wait a minute. No way. Does that mean this is a double Z-Force Agent deck? I have 2 upgrades in hand that both have the same name from the Z-Force series. And yeah, sure enough, I think it was these 2 Z-Wave emitters. I was like, nice, I got a few of the pieces in here. But then I was like, wait a minute. These 2 pieces have the same name. I don't believe it. So sure enough, this is one of the jewels of my collection right here, the double Z-Force Agent 14 deck. I mean, that's just so many Ember pips right here. And then get like all 6 of these upgrades onto Z-Force Agent and fight for a whole key. Deal like 6 damage to each of the fought creature's neighbors. Grab 2 upgrades and put them into your hand. I mean, it's just so fun. And then the deck also has a Universal Translator as a 7th upgrade, Lay of the Land. Access Denied as actually an 8th upgrade. Although usually you would put this one on like an enemy creature, but I mean, I'm probably not going to be reaping with my Z-Force Agent 14, so I mean, might as well throw it on him too if you want. So that's super cool. The double Z-Force Agent 14. But then also, if that wasn't enough, in the Saurian house, we also have a Legacy Brutoton Auxiliary from Worlds Collide. So if it wasn't enough that it's a double Z-Force deck, then it also has the Legacy Brutoton Auxiliary. And this is actually a really solid taunt card. Like, back in Worlds Collide, like, Brutoton was really nice for protecting your creatures, and it's the exact same here in Mass Mutation, which is awesome. With, like, Citizen Strix is really nice, obviously. Cornerstone Octavia to protect stuff like that. Defense Initiative, bring back some of that warding. Sorry About That is awesome as, like, some of that creature control. Siren Horn. I mean, so this Saurian house is pretty decent. It's okay. It's pretty average. But the Brutoton Auxiliary just elevates it that much, just because it happens to be a Legacy. So this deck I haven't played with as much as the Chopibro deck, but I have played with it a few times, and it is a lot of fun, especially just having all these upgrades. Over here in the Sanctum house, Sanctum has some pretty cool stuff as well. Master of the Gray. Your opponent cannot resolve bonus icons on cards they play. That's just a really awesome card. I mean, I love the fact that it's one-sided, so it only applies to them. It's just almost like a witch creature in that vein. I mean, because they just have to deal with it, or their bonus icons just are not functional. Radiant Truth is awesome. Baldric the Bold is one of my favorite Sanctum creatures, just for that burst potential. Double Squire Alice for some capture. Smite. I mean, Smite with Baldric the Bold. Like, it doesn't get better than that. Cleansing Wave is incredible, especially with the Smite. I mean, the Sanctum house has some real combo potential. Or even smiting like Z-Force Agent in a Sanctum turn to fight with Z-Force Agent. That would be super cool. But yeah, this deck is actually a lot of fun. It has a lot of cool lines of play. I don't have quite as much to say on this deck as I did Chopibro, just because I haven't played with it as much, but I do enjoy it quite a bit. Ardent Hero, Champion and Aphiel. There's a decent amount of taunt in here to protect those creatures. I always love throwing Z-Force Agent behind some taunt, just to make it even harder for the opponent to deal with, especially once you get like double Z-Ray Blaster on it. So now it's like, what, +6 power, so that would put it at 11 power, deals 6 damage to each neighbor of the fought creature. I mean, it's just crazy. The only thing that would make this deck better is if it had like a transporter platform in it. That would be insane. And then maybe like an Army Officer Nell. I tried putting together an alliance deck at one point of like just trying to put as many upgrades in the deck as I possibly can. So obviously I took this Star Alliance pod, and then I just took 2 other pods from a couple other decks that also had a lot of upgrades, just threw it all together. The deck didn't play all that well because like a third of the deck was all upgrades. So I mean, it's not helpful if you don't have any creatures out on the board and you just have nowhere to play those upgrades. But it was still kind of a fun experiment either way. So yeah, Holihammer, the Meaningless flat Footman, definitely one of the jewels of my collection just because Z-Force Agent or double Z-Force Agent decks are very few and far between. So the fact that I pulled one, especially during a blind sealed match, is just very exciting. It actually came from one of those 2-player starter sets that was on that fire sale that Aembermedes did. But yeah, so that's the second deck. Let's move on to the final deck of this video. Alrighty, so here we go with my third favorite deck for this video. We have Provost Virus Red, and now this is a Worlds Collide deck with Brobnar. Like what? How could a Worlds Collide Brobnar deck possibly be up there in my favorites? Well, because it has a very specific card in there that makes it actually a lot of fun to play. And as far as Brobnar pods go in Worlds Collide, this one is actually not quite that bad. So we have Provost Virus Red. Let's get into it here. We'll start off with the Starlines. We have the Uncharted Lands, which is such a phenomenal card, especially if you're not in a mirror match, so the opponent doesn't have Starlines. It only applies to you and your creatures. It feels so good. Transporter Platform, amazing card. Science Officer Morpheus, such a good card that it got put on the Alliance Restricted list. If you have a copy of Morpheus in your deck, you can't have anything else from the Restricted list in your deck. I mean, it's that good. Such a great card. Quadricorder, CXO Tabor, Stealth Mode. Sensor Chief, obviously great with the Morpheus. Double Medic Ingram, again, great with the Morpheus. First Officer Frayne, Commander Chan, Armsmaster Molina. And then into the Dis, and this is some of the most purgy Dis that I've ever seen, and it really beefs up the power of the no-name. So no-name purges. It has Soulkeeper, Library of the Damned, Bornit's Touch for some more purging, Rot Grub, Misery Exploit, the Triple Infernus for just an absolute ton of purging, especially when combined with the Science Officer Morpheus. Just purge 4 cards off of a single play of an Infernus is just absolutely evil. Harbinger of Doom, Eterome, Dendrix. So yeah, that just purges stuff like crazy and then beefs up the power of the no-name. We have the Floor is Lava in Brobnar. We have Double Smith, Great Burst, Shattered Throne, really good Brobnar card. After a creature is used to fight, it captures one. Gravel Guts, Warrior's Refrain, Tremor, Mog Hunter, Calfine. And then this is the star of this Brobnar pod, the Legacy Champions Challenge. Destroy each enemy creature except the most powerful enemy creature. Destroy each friendly creature except the most powerful friendly creature. Ready and fight with your remaining creature. It's such a phenomenal board wipe. I mean, it doesn't give you any chains. Then you get to fight with your most powerful creature into their most powerful creature. So I mean, if you have Brobnar, like if you have this Mog Hunter or whatever, or like a beefed up Gravel Guts, then you're most likely going to win that fight. And then it combos especially well with, I mean, drop a Champions Challenge and then a couple more Brobnar creatures, and then the 2 Smiths. I mean, just get like a full key for having more creatures. I mean, so clear the board and then drop 2 Smiths, and you got yourself half a key just like that. Feels really good. So this Brobnar pod is actually a lot of fun. There's the Volcano and the Alaka for a little bit more board control. So I mean, obviously it's still Worlds Collide Brobnar. It's not the best ever, but the Champions Challenge and the fact that it actually contains some halfway decent cards is actually really cool. The Floor is Lava. I think I ranked this pretty darn low in my Artifact tier list video, but the more I play with it, the more I'm like, it's actually not that bad. It's kind of nice just to be able to deal a damage anywhere you want at the start of your turn on the enemy side of the board, and then also on yours. And especially if you're damaging things like the Infernus to get them back into your discard pile quicker, popping some wards on the opponent's side of the board. There's just a lot of like pretty harmless targets, and it sets up for the Misery Exploit very nicely. So this deck is so much fun. I mean, Science Officer Morpheus with things like the Double Medic Ingram and the Triple Infernus can be really cancerous for your opponent to deal with, especially once you just start warding out your Starlines board really fast, reaping with them with the Uncharted Lands pretty quickly. Transporter Platform to maybe put them back in your hand, especially things like the Medic Ingram or the Garcia, is pretty insane. Armsmaster Molina is really nice. No Name gets really powerful. Soulkeeper, putting that on things like these smaller Starlines creatures, because the opponent wants to deal with them, but they're going to lose a creature. In fact, their most powerful creature if they do deal with it. Bornit's Touch is such an awesome card. Just to permanently remove from the game any of those 5 cards is super cool. One of my favorite things to do is if I get CXO Tabor out there with a really big board, I can like reap with the CXO Tabor and then drop a Smith for some even more of that burst that way. But I just have a lot of fun with this deck. It's very much kind of like a play cards, get your board out, generate a whole bunch of Ember, and just purge a whole bunch of stuff just by playing cards, and then reap out. And that's about it. It is nice that it has those board clears, because if I start falling behind on board, then I got the Harbinger with maybe an Eterome. I've got the Champions Challenge, obviously. Like, I just love this card. I cannot believe they did not bring it back into Worlds Collide after, what, Coda? I don't remember if it was an AoE or not, but it was in Call of the Archons, and it was so good. Such a great card. I can't believe it wasn't in Worlds Collide. Like, Champions Challenge may have made Worlds Collide Brobnar just slightly better. It is a rare, so you don't see it very often, but, I mean, it's better than Ragnarok, that's for darn sure. But yeah, Morpheus is just so cool. Like, and this deck isn't rated very highly, but it actually plays very, very well. I mean, like, if I'm up against a deck that bursts through Ember Pips a lot, then this deck, the Triple Infernus, just completely destroys them and their deck, you know? Like, especially with the Morpheus, because let's count. I mean, that's like, with the Morpheus down, that's 4 cards, 8 cards, 12 cards, 13 cards, purge. There's a 14th one, so this would be a 15 power creature that also gets to purge another card every time it fights or reaps. I mean, so this deck is, it just purges like crazy. Or if I don't want to purge the opponent's stuff, then I can start purging some of that Brobnar stuff away that I don't want. Or maybe some of these more like useless disc creatures that you don't want to show up. So then if I could purge enough, and clearly I could purge like my entire Brobnar house, or like most of my Brobnar house and some of my other disc stuff, then I could like just play with Star Alliance for the rest of the game. I mean, so this deck definitely has some potential to it, and I have a lot of fun with it. So even though it's not like the most highest rated deck, Ember Control, like it doesn't have like just loads of Ember Control. Obviously there's like none in the Brobnar, so it's like all concentrated into the Star Alliance and disc pods. It still has a decent bit, but I mean, it's not like super highly rated, but it still plays pretty well, and it's a lot of fun. Science Officer Morpheus, Legacy Champions Challenge, Triple Infernus. So much fun. But yeah, I think that'll about do it for that deck. If you guys see any synergies in these 3 decks that maybe I missed, let me know in the comments, because I'm very keen to continue practicing and playing with these decks to see how to optimize them even better and play with them. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So let me know if you guys see anything that maybe I should know about these decks. Alrighty, but that will do it for today, for the first day of KeyForge Christmas. Thank you guys all so much for watching. It was a lot of fun getting to talk about a few of my favorite decks. Again, it was so hard to choose because I have so many decks that I just absolutely love that I would have loved to talk about. But I think these 3 take the cake for me for the most part. So yeah, thanks again for watching. If you guys see anything in these decks that you think is cool, let me know. I would love to read those comments. And then obviously, again, be sure to tune in to the next 11 days of KeyForge Christmas for even more amazing KeyForge content. And then obviously January 5th, day 13, is when I'll be making that post on the KeyForge giveaway. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you all again in the next one. See you later.